Hi, everyone. Welcome to the session. So I'm pleased to introduce our two speakers today. We have Phil Ahad, who's Chief Digital Officer at Toluna. Phil is responsible for leading the vision, development, and strategy for Toluna's suite of digital market research solutions, and he has held various leadership positions at Toluna over the last 8 years. He is passionate about identifying first with technology and trends that innovate companies, industries, and business concepts. And then we also have Michael Lancor, who's Vice President of Analytics and Insights Accelerator, Human and Behavioral Sciences at Procter & Gamble. Michael has held various leadership positions within P&G in the last 22 years. And he has led the development of best practices across P&G businesses for insight discovery, brand building, consumer fundamentals, communications effectiveness, and retail effectiveness. And today, as we talk about the need for agility and real-time insights, Toluna has announced its new end-to-end consumer intelligence platform, Toluna Start. So before we go give it over to the speakers, just want to let everyone know we'll have a Q&A at the end. So please submit your questions in the chat throughout the session. So with that, I'll hand it over to Michael and Phil.
All right. Thanks, Shauna. Thanks for that great introduction. And thank you all for attending this digital session. It's definitely an exciting day to be talking to you all at IEX. As you heard during the introduction, we at Toluna have announced the launch of our new consumer intelligence platform called Toluna Start. That ties in really nicely with what we're going to discuss today, the future of insights, the need for agility and innovation. If any of you are working like I am these days, and I bet most of you are, you can't wait for the moment that we can get back to doing these events in person. Just for the record, I'm currently sharing my house/workspace with my wife, who also works from home, two young kids who are in virtual schooling. And because we thought life was just way too easy right now, we had the brilliant idea of getting a puppy. So if you hear any background noises, I'm going to apologize in advance. But it's probably safe to assume we're all working under these unique circumstances. And just like the market research industry today, we need to be agile. We need to adapt to the world around us so that we can move forward and make progress. So here we are. Michael, they gave us 30 minutes for something you and I could talk about for days. Do we just jump right into it?
Sounds good, Phil. And congratulations again on Toluna Start.
Thank you so much. So last time we talked, and every time we do talk, I feel like we get into this whole topic about innovation, agility, and just new methods to improve what's called the status quo. From my experience of working with you and the teams over at P&G, you're always willing to try something new, innovate to hopefully improve the quality of insights and speed up the decision-making process. The last time we met, you talked about this concept of constructive disruption, which I loved, and I'm not going to lie to you, I stole, and I've been using it internally ever since. Can you share that concept here with our audience today?
Sure. And, the idea of constructive disruption, as you said, is really, I think, built into P&G's overall kind of DNA, and even to the point where it's actually part of our business strategy. So if you look at our annual report, or if you've heard David Taylor, our CEO, or John Moeller, our CFO, talk, you'll hear them talk about constructive disruption. And, as market leaders, the idea is that we really want to be the ones who are driving disruption in our markets. But we also want to be the ones who are doing it, in a way that's constructive. So, in a way that ultimately benefits our consumers, our customers, and P&G, all in total. So, so that's generally, I think, the idea behind, kind of doing it from that standpoint. And as I mentioned, it's one of those things where, we're constantly looking, I think, for, what is the new S curve in our categories? How do we create that S curve in our categories? What are emerging jobs to be done, or new consumer needs that we can look at? What are the core trends? Anything that would, essentially help us make sure that, we're directing the change in the market versus being, the one trying to play catch up or follow up in market.
Yeah, I mean, everyone I feel like talks about disrupting or wanting to disrupt. Way too often, companies and solutions are just now kind of disrupting for the sake of disrupting. And to me, that gets you in trouble. And actually what ends up happening is having results that are less than optimal. And we talked about this too. We've all heard this, faster, cheaper, better. We've seen the ads in LinkedIn, and it always says you can only pick two. But for me, innovative disruption and constructive disruption actually covers all three. And whenever you're beginning to tackle new product development or new strategies and solutions, especially here at Toluna, we're always considering, okay, well, how can we be faster? How can we be better? And I hate the term cheaper. How can we add more value to the things that we're doing? And at the end of the day, that's really innovative disruption or constructive disruption.
Yeah, for sure. And, and I definitely think it's one of those things, historically in our industry, we've talked about, kind of this idea of, you can have it fast, you can have it cheaper, you can have it good, pick two. We also have been talking for, a number of years, I think now, in terms of the fact, like, is that really true anymore?
Yeah.
And, we definitely, believe that, you should really never be compromising on any of those. And certainly, I think, from the cheap piece, people think about it like you're talking about in terms of dollars. But, there's many other vectors of kind of, efficiency, productivity, agility that we're also, kind of helping to drive from that particular standpoint. I will say, Phil, and I know you and I have talked about this a little bit as well, that I do feel like, today there is a little bit in our industry of this thing where people have gotten so excited about the potential for speed and doing things fast, cheap, iteratively, etc. That I do feel like in some cases, we have to be a little careful that we don't forget about the quality piece of it as well. Even, as we're talking about things, like Toluna and some of the things like sample data, I think one of the things that we often see is that there's often a compromise when people get what I would consider to be a convenience sample because they're in a, real hurry to do it versus getting, something which is a sample that actually represents a population. It's just an example, but I do think it's a important one as we think about innovation to make sure that, we're continuing to stay focused on the quality of the insights and to make sure that we're really delivering truth to all of our constituents.
Yeah, I mean, 2020, I mean, no one planned for anything that's kind of happened this year. You couldn't even build a strategy around what's happened this year. And the consumer sentiment, the consumer behavior has changed so much and so rapidly. How much of that, we've always had this push for speed, but even now it's amplified. How much of that is driving this, cutting corners in terms of quality to try to stay ahead of the consumer sentiment and the changing market?
Yeah, I definitely feel like, people are, really under pressure to get fast results. And I definitely think, if you're not careful or don't have the right systems in place, that you can be compromising quality. And so I do think, that is kind of what the core driver that we're, kind of seeing today in market. I think it's just one of those things where we as an industry still have to step back and make sure that we're, not compromising, on probably the place that kind of matters most, if you will, which is quality.
Yeah. I mean, it's key. You got to be able to reach the right audience, to ask them the right questions, get that data back quickly, be able to act on it quickly, to stay ahead of the consumer curve, I'd say. This is kind of why, this is the reason why whenever we're finding a solution or working closely with a client like yourselves who's got this challenge and this need, is to be able to create but maintain the same level of quality and improve it. Because even if it's too slow, it's just as bad. Because if it's not fast enough to stay ahead of the consumer market, you miss an opportunity, or you're slow to react to an opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that the other thing, Phil, that we've talked about is that it does seem like the pace of things has really picked up. Yeah. I know, in the whole space of like where we are right now with, kind of COVID and some of the changes there. There was a recent McKinsey article that talked about, how we've basically accelerated things 10 years in 3 months. And while I think, 10 years is probably a bit of hyperbole, the thing that I would say is that, I do think that we have seen like an acceleration. We've seen an acceleration, I think, from a standpoint of consumer trends in the market, adoption of things like e-commerce. I heard a presentation yesterday from some, political folks that were talking about how political trends have accelerated dramatically, like in the past few months because of COVID. And I think we've seen that in our industry as well. And I think it's driving this pace of change and adoption of technology, in many cases in a really good way, where we're, I think, more quickly adapting and adopting, kind of the new technologies that are helping us to get to better insights faster. I think, the key thing in doing that is to make sure that we're not, in any way cutting corners as we go about it.
Well, I mean, thinking about 2020, a lot of us have had to do a 180 in terms of pivoting. Like, what changes have you guys done in your approach to collect insights, retaining that quality, but also trying to stay ahead of what feels like something changing every single day?
Yeah, for sure. And, and I think in our particular case, a couple of things that were really working in our favor is that, we already had done a lot of work to try to future proof our business and some of our capabilities. We've done a lot of upskilling in our organization so that people have really good hands on capability for DIY types of research. And we put in place really good technology platforms. And I think as a result, one of the things that we were able to do from a response standpoint is pretty quickly get up and running in market with very direct consumer feedback. And like an example of that is I know between like the February and June period, that we had over 250,000 touches with consumers, in our efforts to make sure that we were really staying in touch with what was happening, because things were changing so quickly. So I think our ability to really have kind of the right systems in place as well as the right skill sets in place to deliver some of those real-time insights to the business was really critical in terms of us really helping make sure that we understood what our consumers were really thinking, what they were feeling, what they were experiencing, and how we could make sure we were better meeting their needs.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on DIY, and I think DIY is a strong point right now. I mean, you mentioned this acceleration of 10 years in 3 months. We've seen some industries, especially in e-commerce, just blow away their performance numbers this year, and actually hit numbers this year that they probably wouldn't hit in 2025. What is P&G? I mean, you guys are always trying and testing new things and testing new methods and solutions, especially from a DIY standpoint. What do you think sticks long term for you going into 2021?
Well, I think, the thing that I would say like about most of the things that we've been, kind of doing is I think that, I don't know that there's anything that we would consider changing really about what we've kind of adopted as part of, the acceleration due to COVID. As I'd mentioned, some of those things were things that we were already kind of working on and in place that really helped drive, faster adoption. But in addition to that, I think as well, some of the things that, we had to really do some pivots on, things like contactless research. I think, we've really, like a lot of the types of things that we're doing now, the methods that we're using are things that we'll continue to do going forward. And I think, if anything else, I don't think the pace of change is going to slow down. So, even if we had 10 years and 3 months, I don't think that means that we can, sit still for the next 10 years. I think in the next 3 months, we might see another 10 years. So I think it's just a matter of really trying to continue to accelerate progress, across all those vectors. And I do feel like, the DIY component has really helped us as well, primarily from the standpoint that it allowed us to be much more agile, and have a much granular level of understanding of what was happening with our consumers and market because, we were down and able to get, immediately in touch with consumers directly, be in the data, and really directly understand what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, when we kind of approached our new platform vision and, working with key stakeholders such as yourself and your teams and our other, 5,000 brands across the world, the adoption of DIY was prime and center. But the adoption of DIY while maintaining the same quality standards that they were getting from traditional research was key. And, how you kind of overcome that hurdle is how much of it you can standardize and automate by using really, proven research methodology, integrating proven research methodology into it. How does that approach kind of change, your process moving forward?
Well, I think that you're really touching on the fact that, the need to really very rapidly look at and adopt new technologies that are really a good supplement to, what we're developing, I think, is new skill sets. So the two really go, very, very much hand in hand. And, I think the technology does play a key role in terms of helping us, automate the things that we can automate. Again, if we're talking about something like, like research or sample quality, like to some degree, we need to out innovate, things like bots happening in the market, and make sure that, we have the right technology in place to, really be getting, good quality sample to make sure that people really know what that is. And then I think on the, skill part of it, we need to make sure that we have those skills in place as well. I think that's particularly true, also on the data side. Because, it used to be that, from a, insights and analytics point of view, that a lot of the work that we were doing was with, standard survey or consumer type data. I think today, as it becomes more and more data, I think the skill sets are dramatically changing. The need for people to really deeply understand and have skills in things like creating Power BI dashboards, or NIME flows, or programming in Python, are things that I think are becoming fairly status quo for people in our industry.
Yeah. In the topic of speed and just keeping up with the consumers, I'm going to go back to this point again. As you look at the whole process, and especially P&G, you're, a lot of things you're doing yourself, a lot of things you are, pushing outside to full service firms. But of the step of, setting up, programming, identifying the research, fielding the work, analyzing the data, and making those business decisions, which of those like 4 key buckets would you say takes up the most time of your team?
I think that, like the thing that ultimately, is probably, is hopefully like the thing, that I think would be taking up the most time is probably 2 things. Is one, like on the front end, really making sure that we're, doing the right, kind of thing to begin with, having the right research and learning plans in place, and designing really good quality research. I think, like on the back end, then, I think is a lot of where the effort ends up being, just from the standpoint of making sure that, again, we're getting the data, we're understanding the data, integrating the data, and then also using it, in a way that's really driving action. And so, I think more and more, I think it's just, allowing our real expert folks to be able to take that data and drive it to action, which is probably the really critical component of that. I think in the middle, if you look at some of the, kind of steps, I think the more that we can really automate some of that, I think it really, helps us all in terms of really being able to focus on where we're bringing the most expertise.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of leads into another topic we've talked about too, is from a data standpoint, leveraging AI and machine learning to be able to, move away from just getting your standard data file with your basic crosstabs, and then you've got to do all this heavy lifting to try to find the trends or the right business actions, and leveraging some of these technologies to be able to at least give you a first cut of it. How much of that do you foresee P&G doing now or doing well into the future?
I mean, a lot of it. I think, we would see that as a core technology moving forward that we're leveraging, across all different types of research. And, as you mentioned, it is fairly transformative in terms of, I think what's possible. And I think, again, we've been talking about this idea of, constructive disruption and acceleration. Like I think that's definitely one of the spaces where we have seen a dramatic acceleration in terms of what's possible, over the last few years, and certainly even over the last few months, just in regards to, kind of what's available, with really strong, capabilities like you were talking about in things like machine learning, artificial intelligence, and, like natural language processing, some of the visual algorithms that are out there, et cetera. Like all of those things, I think, are things that are very rapidly transforming how we're thinking about doing research, as well as, like you're talking about, even in, kind of more of our traditional forms of research, like how we leverage some of those technologies to really make those things, again, like this idea of kind of, better, faster, more efficient.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I don't know about you. It's 2020 in terms of just looking back at the last 6 months, and now I'm starting to think about 2021 and our planning, our development, our roadmap cycles, and just our clients and then their needs at the end of 2020. Have you guys started thinking about 2021 and the changes you made over the course of 2020 and how that impacts your planning going forward?
Yeah, and what I would tell you, Phil, from that standpoint is, definitely, and I think we would continue to, leverage, again, a lot of, I think, what we've, kind of learned, a lot of what's working for us, and really try to speed adoption of some of those things that, have happened, like we were talking about, in regards to, DIY research, this upskilling in our expertise, as well as, some of the new technologies like, AI, machine learning that we're talking about. So I think part of what we're seeing kind of going forward is a continued acceleration in many of those spaces. And, I think from our end, really continuing to accelerate not only our capabilities in those spaces, but probably more importantly, really making sure that we're widely adopting those, kind of across our practitioners in the business.
Yeah, for sure. as I said, we're kind of starting to look at 2021, and we're looking at roadmap, and we just announced the launch of a new platform. And as we kind of look at the needs of the industry, it's infusing standard research practices, really powerful methodology into the technology and the platform, because we've heard this from clients for years. Just giving you a black box, open box survey tool and allowing you to just do whatever you can in it also can have its issues, right? Yeah, sure, you're empowering and you're being faster, but how much of that research is proven, it works, and how much of it can be leveraged from like country to country and region to region, and ensure you're standardizing across the group so that a result from a concept test in Brazil mirrors a result of a concept test in the UK, and you can roll out data.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You'll notice even like in my my title, it says human and behavioral sciences.
It's not long, honestly.
Yeah, and that's to make it much longer for to make it difficult to put on a business card. But the thing about that is like again like really trying to make sure that we are really bringing some science to bear. Because I do think that, very often, like you're talking about, there's lots and lots of new capabilities and techniques out there. There's lots of opportunities for us to use technology. But I do think that, we do need to make sure that, what we're doing and what we're putting out there, again, represents the truth and are validated methodologies. And I do think that, this idea of even, making sure that we're consistently looking at, and really understanding like what's working, what's not working, but doing the actual validation work to prove, that if, that a certain type of method, works better than another method, versus necessarily just doing kind of what's fastest and cheapest.
I agree. All right. Let's leave a few minutes for Q&A. I think the team has a couple based on the chat that you guys have been putting out there. Oh, here we are. Hey, Janice, any questions from the audience?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Hopefully I'll get through them. Most of the questions that we've seen are actually in two of the categories that you covered and spoke to very passionately. So the topic of data quality was certainly one that people were very interested in. And one of the questions was around the idea of maintaining data quality when using platform-based approaches. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, Phil, if this is something that you would want to answer, or Michael, this is something that you'd want to speak to first, but how is that quality maintained when the process is in fact automated or DIY?
Yeah, I'll start, and Michael, you can layer in terms from your experience standpoint. But I mean, quality for us as an industry is never going to go away. I mean, we're always going to have to really focus on quality and ensure quality every step of the process, from the design of the survey to the research components of it, and more importantly, the panel and the quality of those specific results. From a Toluna perspective, we own and manage our own global community panel. We have multiple layers in place, from registration of these panelists to even accessing partner panel, that they go through a variety of digital fingerprinting, ensuring they're not bots, ensuring they're quality people. And then when you're in the survey itself, ensuring that the survey is designed in a way that is relevant to the panelists, that doesn't create unbiased response or biased responses. And then, the standard measures of, red herrings here and there. And then all the way to the end of the data deliverable standpoint.
Yeah, and I would, just build on that, saying, Phil, that like I agree that, from our end, we would say that, we do seek to work with partners, like Toluna, that are doing, the hard work of making sure that, we are getting really good quality sample. And I think then, on top of that, making sure that even, as we look at our own internal systems, that when we're, bringing that data or getting that data in our internal systems, that we have the ability to, again, in some ways, maybe, kind of automate or check that data that's coming in is, good, accurate data, as well as making sure that the people who are getting that data understand what good data is, and how to, really understand if there's an issue with that data, so that we can, continue to maintain those types of quality standards. I also think, I've been part of, kind of the case effort to, really help drive research quality across the industry. I know, Toluna and, Phil, that you guys have been part of that work as well. And I do think as an industry that, it's probably like the kind of core third component, if you will, that we need to continue to make sure that we're creating very strict industry standards and figuring out ways to make sure that we're continuing to help, develop like a level of professionalism and expertise that's delivering that standard across the industry.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Changing topics slightly, and this was a question that was asked several times, so I know we need to address it certainly. And Michael, the question was around automation and using automated processes in terms of your research efforts. The question is around specifically which types of methodologies lend themselves to automation best, or what types of projects might you look at and consider implementing automation to conduct?
Yeah, I think that that overall, like, the only thing that's difficult, to answer about that question is that I would say most, if not all, of our processes probably have an opportunity for automation, depending on how you're, kind of looking at it. So I don't know that there's any particular like one class of research that I would say, that you wouldn't necessarily be able to automate. And, I think part of what we've been looking at are, kind of frameworks to think about like what type of automation, will be most effective against, different types of research objectives or goals, putting in place kind of platforms that, look across different research types and really help, kind of standardize some of that automation across those research types, as well as, I think, we're talking about, things like the analytics. And I think one of the core things, from that standpoint is also making sure that we have the right things in place from that point of view as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the whole insights collection process, I mean, there are certain stages that can be automated. The automation of sample procurement, the automation of standardized questions within servant design, the automation of info boards and digital reporting. And then, we're also we're working on infusing weighting algorithms to derive answers from raw data sets that you can act on and rely on. It's not about end-to-end automation, although that's a big focus of what we're trying to do right now to simplify the entire research process for those who aren't such heavy lifting research professionals, but then also empower them to be able to do that on their own, either automate or fully, build each one of those steps.
Great. I think that we have time for one more question, and this is on to you, Michael. So the 2020 playbook has kind of changed dramatically from what we thought we'd see at the beginning of the year. What are you looking forward to in 2021? What do you see for your, as an opportunity for your team and for your company?
Well, I think, from an opportunity space, I mean, I think, 2020, while it's certainly, I think, been a challenging year in many ways, I think the benefit, that we've been talking about is this idea that it really has helped accelerate, I think, the adoption of many of the things that we were doing from, technology and tool point of view. And so as we move into 2021, I feel that a lot of those particular things that, we've adopted, as part of, kind of necessity, if you will, from a COVID standpoint, that those are really, kind of helping us leapfrog in terms of making sure that we're, putting in place the right types of, kind of methodologies, the right types of tools, and really leveraging technology in a way that continues to allow us to, accelerate insights. I think that, one of the things, overall, when I think about, kind of the future of research is a lot of what we do doesn't necessarily change, but how we do it is changing really quickly. And so, as we're moving into, kind of 2021, that acceleration in terms of adopting, kind of some of the things that Phil was mentioning, like AI, machine learning, as well as, automation, some of the newer, kind of more virtual capabilities we developed, et cetera. I think all of those things are, tremendous opportunities for us and are going to have a big difference in terms of just making sure that we continue to accelerate our progress and being able to bring, better, more useful insights to our business faster.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's to continue to build on the technology stack that we've created, but to also continue to build on the research practice that we've also maintained. It does us no good to build technology that doesn't return high quality results. It doesn't maintain the speed and stays ahead of consumers. So as we kind of progress into 2021, the stigma that DIY results in poor quality, to me, shouldn't exist. How a DIY technology stack in the right person's hands is incredibly powerful. And even if not, a DIY technology stack that's automated with proven research methodology is very powerful. So it's whatever fits that person's needs, that project needs, that we can deliver on.
Great. I think we've come up on time and we've had so many questions. We unfortunately didn't get to all of them, and we'll do our best to follow up with you that, the questions that remain unanswered. Thank you so much, Phil. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both so much. And I just have a couple of quick announcements. So also, if you want to continue to ask questions, you can use the community tab on the agenda to contact our speakers and reach out to them. So definitely keep that in mind. And then just a reminder of our social media challenge. So please post a picture with the hashtag IIEX with your whoever's keeping you company as you work from home right now. So we'd love a picture of that puppy, for example. I think there was a request on the chat to see the dog.
Awesome.
And then whoever wins the challenge will get to choose $500 donation to a charity of their choice. So everyone keep that in mind as well. And thank you so much. And we'll see you on our other sessions.
Yep. Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.